President Massimino, my good friend Bill Zabel, fellow adherents to the idea and the reality of the rule of law, thank you so very much for your gracious welcome and for your reception and for this splendid award. The award is the Beacon Award, which must remind us that it is our duty as Americans, our duty as citizens of the world, our duty as persons, our duty as human beings, to ensure that light is always cast in the darkness and in the shadows where injustice persists. Congratulations for what this magnificent association does to remind us, as this award reminds me and should remind you, that we must always rededicate ourselves to the proposition that the work of freedom is never done. It's very interesting and very important to note that your group consists of lawyers and members and supporters from many other disciplines and backgrounds. My wife Mary was a teacher, and in the third grade they had once every year a day when the fathers or the mothers would come in and say what their job was. And so I went to say, I'm Judge Kennedy on the Ninth Circuit. I gave the kids a little lecture, and then I would have them write me a note. And I'd talk to them a little bit about the Constitution. So the note came back, and it said, "This was a very important lecture. I learned that there are three parts of government: lawyers, judges, and attorneys." I like. But the Constitution isn't just for lawyers and judges. It's yours. It's all of ours. In the practice of law, one of the biographies I've been reading recently is of Gandhi. He was a wonderful lawyer. And he said the duty of the lawyer is to unite parties who've been driven asunder. And in my practice, unless we were able to settle a case, I can't say that this happened often. But in the world of public law, in the world of defining and defending and preserving and enriching and respecting human rights, we can unite, all of us for different disciplines. Thoreau wrote Civil Disobedience, and that influenced Gandhi, the attorney. Gandhi then wrote, and that influenced Martin Luther King, a non-attorney. And Martin Luther King, letters from Birmingham jail and other writings, influenced Mandela, an attorney. So you have philosophers, thinkers, and attorneys working together. Mandela said, when we throw off our chains to find freedom, our next job is to live in a way that respects and enriches the freedom of others. And that's the purpose of your association. And that's our common commitment. The Constitution is a word we usually spell with a big C, capital C. That's the Constitution of the United States. We were talking at dinner about the fact that we're from many different backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, nationalities, but we're united by this thing called the Constitution. It's our self-identity. It's who we are. And so when we think of the Constitution, we usually think of the Constitution with the big C. The Constitution was drafted in the hot summer of 1787, ratified in 1789. Bill of Rights was added to it in 1791. But Constitution also has another meaning with a small c. And this is a word, Constitution, that was used by political theorists from early times, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, but beyond that, Aristotle, beyond that, Plato, and later Jacques Martin and Harrington. Constitution with a small c to mean the sum total of traditions, customs, mores, principles, virtues that define a culture, that define a civilization. And when the rest of the world looks at America, and much of the rest of the world does look at America because the verdict of freedom is still out. Half the world is still wondering whether they should vote for freedom. And when they look at the United States, they see the small c Constitution. And our small c Constitution must include a civic discourse, a civic tradition, a history, a heritage, an ongoing commitment to a dialogue and a conversation that's decent and rational and respectful and enviable for showing the respect we have for each other as humans. And we must work on this small c Constitution. We must work on this civic dialogue. That's the way that's the principal object of scrutiny and examination, and we hope of teaching that the rest of the world looks at. Now, the big Constitution and the small c Constitutions, they'd come together. But this small c Constitution, the conversations we have, the debates we have, the civic discourse we have, the ability we have to recognize that one of the purposes of freedom is to plan our destiny. Not long ago, my granddaughter is a ballet dancer, and we were at Chautauqua, and they had some for her ballet performance. But they had a thing going on about Greek history. So they said, well, you're on this panel to talk about ancient Greece. So, you know, we know about everything on the Supreme Court. So, I didn't know what to say. So one of the questions I had was, would Greek, and the Greek we were talking about, ancient Greece, Athens, Periclean Athens, 500 BC, close enough for government work. And so I asked the question, would the Greeks think we were free? And would we think the Greeks were free? Taking the first, I said, now in case anybody from the National Enquirer is here, I know slavery, men only, I know that. What would the Greeks think we were free? The Greeks took an oath, the Athenians, when they became of age of citizenship, which was 18. And it's a beautiful oath in Greek. And it said, we swear and we commit, and we undertake and we promise that we will engage in civic affairs to the end that Athens will be more beautiful, more safe, and more free for our successors than it is for us. They thought freedom was the capacity to plan your destiny and the duty to engage in a rational, decent discourse to explain the values of your people to the rest of the world. Athens failed because it did not obey its oath, was not faithful to its oath. And this must not happen to us. And we must remember, when we were talking at the dinner table, you don't take a DNA test to see if you believe in freedom or human rights. It's taught. It's taught. 3 years ago, the State Department asked me to please go to Western Europe. We've spent a number of years in Austria at the University of Salzburg because there are some serious problems in the judiciaries in some of the countries of Eastern Europe. And so the conference agenda that was put in place at my request was to have, we had 7 U.S. ambassadors to the Eastern and Central European countries. And we met in Vienna. And I asked each ambassador to bring one judge from their country whom they respected most, so it would be a small group. And the purpose of our discussion was our concern that the judiciaries in many of these countries were being subject to tremendous political pressures, including by some of the chief justices who did not understand judicial independence. Years ago, as a young person, I thought what we would do is we go to a country and say, oh, here's democracy, you're free, goodbye. It doesn't work that way. And after this meeting, there were a number of judges, maybe 100 judges. And a young woman stood up from an Eastern European country, and she said, there are 2 tragedies in my country. One is that the rule of law is slipping away. The other is that many understand it, but few seem to care. We must care about the rule of law. We must care and teach the meaning of human rights, which is the heritage of freedom. Thank you very much.